Welcome to Learn English with Abbas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a new English podcast with Abbas, the place where you improve your English fluency naturally through powerful conversations, listening practice, and real-life speaking techniques that help you become more confident every single day.
Hi, everyone. I'm really excited about today's topic because, honestly, this is something I struggled with for a very long time during my own English learning journey. I used to believe that translating was normal and necessary, but over time, I realized that translation was actually making my speaking slower, less natural, and much more stressful during conversations. And that happens to millions of learners around the world, Daniel, because most people first learn English through grammar rules and translation methods instead of learning how to think directly in English naturally. Exactly, because many learners create the sentence in their native language first, and only after that, they try to convert it into English, which makes speaking feel slow and uncomfortable.
Yes, and the biggest problem with translation is that your brain is trying to work in two languages at the same time, which creates hesitation, nervousness, and confusion during real conversations.
I think this is why many learners understand English very well while listening or reading, but when it is finally time to speak, they suddenly become quiet because their brain cannot translate fast enough.
That is absolutely correct, because fluency is not only about knowing vocabulary and grammar. Fluency is also about training your brain to respond naturally without depending on translation every second.
Exactly, because many learners create the sentence in their native language first, and only after that they try to convert it into English, which makes speaking feel slow and uncomfortable.
Yes, and the biggest problem with translation is that your brain is trying to work in two languages at the same time, which creates hesitation, nervousness, and confusion during real conversations.
Yes, and the biggest problem with translation is that your brain is trying to work in two languages at the same time, which creates hesitation, nervousness, and confusion during real conversations.
That is absolutely correct, because fluency is not only about knowing vocabulary and grammar. Fluency is also about training your brain to respond naturally, without depending on translation every second.
I remember there were many situations where someone asked me a simple question in English, and even though I knew the answer, my brain stopped for a moment because I was trying to translate everything perfectly before speaking.
Even more nervousness, because when learners hesitate too much, they start losing confidence and become afraid of making mistakes in front of other people.
Exactly, and sometimes the pressure becomes so strong that learners avoid speaking English completely because they feel embarrassed about speaking slowly or incorrectly.
But the truth is that fluency develops when your brain starts connecting thoughts directly with English, instead of using translation as a middle step during communication.
I think many learners wonder if it is actually possible to stop translating completely, especially if they have used this habit for many years.
That is a very good question. And the answer is yes, it is absolutely possible. But it does not happen overnight because your brain needs regular practice and exposure to build new thinking habits.
So basically, learners should not expect instant results, but instead focus on slowly training their mind through simple daily English practice.
So basically, learners should not expect instant results, but instead focus on slowly training their mind through simple daily English practice.
I think one of the easiest ways to start thinking in English is through simple daily thoughts during normal activities.
Yes, that is one of the most powerful methods, because learners do not need difficult exercises in the beginning. They simply need to start creating small English thoughts naturally throughout the day. For example, when I wake up in the morning, I can think simple sentences like, I need to get ready, I feel sleepy today, or I should drink some coffee. Exactly. And these simple thoughts slowly train your brain to connect directly with English words without first depending on your native language.
I actually started practicing this recently, and at first it felt strange and difficult, but after several days, I noticed that some English sentences started coming into my mind more naturally.
That is exactly how progress begins, because your brain slowly adapts through repeated exposure and regular practice until English starts feeling more automatic and comfortable.
I think another reason learners struggle with translation is because they are too focused on grammar perfection while speaking.
You are absolutely right. Because when learners try to create perfect grammar during every conversation, they overthink too much and speaking becomes stressful instead of natural.
And honestly, native speakers themselves do not always speak with perfect grammar in casual conversations, because communication is more important than perfection.
Exactly. And fluent communication is about expressing your thoughts clearly and confidently, not about creating perfect textbook sentences every single time.
I think this idea can help many learners relax more during conversations, because fear of mistakes is one of the biggest causes of hesitation.
Yes, and learners should remember that mistakes are not signs of failure. Mistakes are signs of progress because every mistake teaches your brain something valuable about the language.
Another thing I noticed is that learners who listen to English regularly often become more fluent naturally over time.
That happens because listening is one of the most powerful ways to train your brain for natural English thinking, since your mind slowly becomes familiar with sentence patterns, pronunciation, rhythm, and common expressions.
So, podcasts, movies, interviews, and conversations are not only useful for entertainment, but also for improving fluency and reducing translation habits.
Absolutely, because the more English your brain hears daily, the more naturally it starts understanding the language without needing constant mental translation.
I also think learners should practice speaking to themselves more often, because self-speaking removes the fear of judgment from other people.
That is actually a very powerful technique because speaking to yourself in English helps your brain become comfortable with forming sentences naturally and confidently.
For example, while walking outside or sitting alone in my room, I sometimes describe everything around me in English, just for practice.
And that is an excellent habit because describing your surroundings in English strengthens the connection between your thoughts and English vocabulary naturally.
I think many learners underestimate how powerful small daily habits can become after several months of consistency.
Yes, because fluency is not created through one day of hard study. Fluency is built through small daily actions repeated consistently over time.
Another problem learners face is becoming discouraged too quickly when they do not see immediate improvement.
That is very common, but learners must understand that language learning is a long-term journey, and progress often happens slowly before suddenly becoming noticeable.
So instead of focusing only on fast results, learners should focus more on consistency and enjoying the process of improving step by step.
Exactly, because when you enjoy learning English through conversations, podcasts, and daily practice, your motivation stays stronger for a much longer time.
I honestly feel that this topic is extremely important because translation is one of the biggest hidden reasons why many learners never feel comfortable speaking English naturally.
And the good news is that every learner can improve this problem slowly through listening practice, daily English thinking, self-speaking, patience, and consistency.
Thank you so much, Emma, because today's conversation was extremely motivating and helpful. And I think many listeners now understand why translation habits affect fluency so much.
You are very welcome, Daniel. And thank you everyone for listening to today's episode of English Pro Podcast. And before we finish today's episode, remember this important message. Fluency begins when you stop translating and start thinking directly in English naturally.
We truly hope you enjoyed today's episode, and we will see you again very soon with another powerful English speaking practice conversation here on English Pro Podcast.